of the four modelers who are building this kit of MoTracks, Greg Cassidy and Bob Farquhar, are going to talk about their model of the kit in HO for Greg and S scale for Bob. So Bob, I'll turn it over to you first, sir.
All right, I'm going to go do this. Come on here, there it is. Okay, this is going to be part 3 of the 5. There's going to be walls, windows, and doors installed today. S scale for me, and this from last time. Using the 100 line driftwood stain. I want to stain my before I paint because I want the building to look used. I didn't want a brand new pristine look on it at all. So a lot of people do the bracing on these pieces before they start staining and painting. I don't, but anyway, I have my own reasons. But so then I use this ivory colored acrylic paint on there. I always use a grout sponge. It has smaller holes in it, better control, and just dab it onto the piece of wood and so on, and put them in pieces of wax paper and let it dry overnight. And then I can then I do my brass bristle brush and I scrub it. So this area right here.
Bob, can you click on the slideshow mode down at the bottom?
Sorry about that. Sorry. Yep.
Thanks.
Forgot to do that today. There you go. So this area here is not scrubbed, and you can see the difference of the dirtier looking paint on the rest of the other pieces here. And then I did just like Clark was talking about last week, the trim on the edges. Did that, just put them on there like this, and then after it dries, it cut it to size. And what I've done here is use a thinner strip wood than it said in the instructions, and because I didn't want them be really wide, so I got the thinner one here. The other thing too, this is the same color paint on the trim, but the wood is denser on the strip wood than it is on the wall pieces, so it gives a nice little different. Well, never mind, different. Anyway, so then I did some bracing on it real quick. I used this burnt sienna acrylic paint on the windows and doors. These are laser cut. The N scale, S and O scale kits all come with laser cut windows and doors in this kit, and the HO has plastic windows and doors. And there's the windows and doors installed. And yeah, then I just like what Clark did last week as well. He was talking about doing the shape of an L, make sure it's square on both sides, and then put it together. And you see here, the groove is still wet. And then when I took the picture, and then I thought, oh, geez, that's not level. I straightened that up later on to make sure that's on there, but you have to add that piece in there. And that's it for me. And over to you, Greg, to continue on.
All righty, thank you, Bob. So I've got mine pulled up here. And so I'll be covering the HO scale portion of part 3 of the MoTrack build along of the Adamsville Depot. One of the things that I noticed in all these 4 different scales that we're working in is the way that the buildings were assembled. In the smaller scales, the S scale, HO, and N scale, they have the more typical corner trim where you butt the walls against it and you brace it on the inside and then put a piece of corner trim on the outside like Bob was just showing. But on the O scale, you have the tab and slot type of construction. I've seen both of these done in all different scales in different kits. And I don't know if one's better than the other, but I've seen the tab and slot in larger kits more often. And I think it's a little stronger. That's probably why you see that. So for mine, I had already shown painting the walls in the last session. Often I will go ahead and put my windows and doors in the walls while they're still flat, and any other work I may need to do on them because it's easier then. But in this case, I was going to be masking the building once it was assembled, and the walls and doors could get in the way of doing that. So I decided to assemble the building first and then install the windows later. Now, For this, I use my standard practice of assembling walls when you're going to have corner trim and their wood siding. Basically, it's putting a brace on the inside that's set back just enough that you can fit another brace that's here on the end wall right in there. If you leave that space the same, then when you put the end wall in, it leaves a nice little notch for the corner trim. And here I'll show you what I mean. The bracing 1 is on the side wall and it's glued to the side wall. Bracing 2 is on the end wall and it's glued to the end wall. And if you put them together, you then have this nice little notch right here for the corner trim that fits in. And that's a standard way of that I do of putting my walls together. It's a very strong joint, makes for a nice 90-degree angle. And then once I've glued the walls together, I'll go ahead and clamp it. I often will put 2 sets of walls together in an L shape and let them both dry, make sure they're square, and then put them together. But this one was so small, it was easy enough to put all of them together at one time and make sure it all came out straight. Then once that had dried, just as Bob had, I put in my corner trim. And like he did, I didn't need to cut the corner trim to size. I just made sure that as I glued it in, I made the bottom flush and then the top was overhanging some. And I use canopy glue to hold that in. It's nice because if it squeezes out, it's easy to get rid of and it usually is invisible. And then once the corner trim was dry, I would use a scalpel and cut the little part that was sticking up off. Then I'll use a sanding stick to sand everything flush. And as I showed in the previous session, I had sanded the edges of the side walls at an angle as well. So that way, once you're all done, you get a nice crisp angle that leaves a flush surface for the roof to attach to. The next thing was to glue in the trim around the freight door. I put in the top piece first, measured it to fit, and then glued it in. And then you can measure your 2 side pieces from that down to the bottom of the wall and glue those in. Often you'll have a contrasting color in your corner trim and trim around a door or something. But since I was going to be doing 2 colors on my walls, I decided to leave it as is. Now, mine was not going to be a freight door because I'm building this into a coffee shop that is part of the depot. So I needed to cut a window in my freight door that was going to be the serving window. And one of the tricks I do is I usually have a scale size person laying around on my workbench so I can use them to see where I need to position stuff. And that showed me that my window was in the right place. Now, once I was ready to install the windows that came with the kit, I painted them. The HO scale version came with Tichy plastic windows, and that's very common with HO kits because Tichy makes millions of these things. I airbrushed my windows and door with my burnt umber. And then after that had dried, I came back and brush painted the trim on the windows in my lighter tan. Next up was to cut the acetate for the windows. And this was a nice little addition in the kit, is the cutting template that shows you what size to cut all the windows to. If you don't get the acetate that comes with Tichy windows, then you find yourself using a ruler to measure all these things. And sometimes that's difficult. Now, the way I tend to glue the acetate into plastic windows is with a thin cement like this. I'll place the acetate on the window and then just touch it to the corners. And the capillary action allows it to wick in underneath it. And then once it dries in place, I'll just trim them off and touch up the little spots where I trimmed it with a brush. At this point, I went ahead and masked off the bottom part of my building and airbrushed it with the burnt umber. Then when I was test fitting in my windows and doors, I decided that with the door, I wanted to paint the trim around it in my light tan color. Now, the cupola on this comes with laser cut windows for it, But this having a kitchen inside it, I decided I wanted to make them into vents. So I actually found some pallets and skids that looked right. I cut little pieces off of them and then painted them in my light tan color. At this point, I went ahead and glued in my windows and my door. And for this, I used canopy glue, but I've used ACC in the past as well. When you're gluing plastic to wood, both of those seem to hold equally as well. Then I went ahead, and the trim on my cupola vents was a dark brown. I went ahead and glued those in place. And then I made a little service counter for my window and stained it with a nice brown stain. And that's about as far as we've come with this. Next week, I think it's going to be Clark and Bob will be covering adding the roof and the cupola, and we'll take it from there.